Trade. Now, before you zone out, there's something you need to know. Trade isn't just about business people selling and buying stuff. The rules around trade can have a real and long-lasting impact on all of our lives and on the lives of our tamariki mokopuna. Because big trade agreements impact on decisions we want to make around the climate crisis, mining of our whenua and seabed, the health of our waterways, access to medicines and rongoa, preservation and protection of our culture, our taonga, mātauranga Māori. And when it comes to that digital space, that space we're always in, you need to know that tech companies can sell your data to advertisers who can then use it to target Māori with stuff like fast food or tobacco-related products. So when you think about it, even our whakapapa is exposed. Trade is everybody's business, but it is especially Māori business because we have te tiriti. You might ask why Māori haven't been actively and meaningfully involved every step of the way in making these rules. Some very onto it people have been asking that very same question for a very long time. In the early 1990s, the Y262 claim challenged the Crown over breaches of te tiriti at the World Trade Organization.
Well, there are a number of issues which came together, if you like. One was the historical taking and misuse of Māori taonga or treasures, whether it was the abuse of the tiki, whether it was the use of Māori faces on tourist tea towels or whatever. So there was that long historical issue. And in the 1980s, there were the more specific issues which had arisen largely in the context of multilateral trade agreements and the establishment of intellectual property regimes in the United Nations and the World Intellectual Property Organization.
Y262 was concerned about protecting plants and seeds. Like when Japan gene-banked varieties of kumara we were kaitiaki over. And a bunch of companies with no relationship to Māori started to sell products overseas that included kawakawa and manuka, making money out of mātauranga Māori. When Ngāti Awa tried to repatriate the Mātātua Wharenui, they were told it was an intellectual property issue. What is this thing, intellectual property, they wondered. So in 1993, they hosted the first global conference on cultural and intellectual property rights of Indigenous people in Whakatane. Yep, Whakatane. And out of that came the Mātātua Declaration. Indigenous people said, we have the right and responsibility to control our own taonga.
Laws with claws like parasites, devouring my human rights.
Then heaps of Māori joined a global protest movement in the late 90s over the proposed Mai multilateral agreement on investment. Mai was all about protecting the rights of foreign companies, like those who bought forests on Māori land that were privatised without Māori consent, and massive mining companies ripping the heart out of the land. Global pressure was so big, the Mai was dropped. Some companies wanted our words.
The names and images of other Indigenous people, say in the United States, have been exhausted. They've all been taken. So they look somewhere else, and across the vast expanse of the Pacific, there's this whole range of primitive newness that has not yet been exploited in the current market environment.
When I released my self-titled album into Europe, I was threatened with a lawsuit by a German company who had trademarked the name Moana.
At the beginning of the tour, we got this fax coming through in our office from a lawyer from Cologne saying he's got the trademark for the name Moana.
So he had trademarked it for toilet paper, for computers, for cosmetics, nearly everything you could think of. Then suddenly we got an email saying you can't use that name Moana, otherwise we will sue you. You have to pay quite a big fine of something like 100,000 euro.
Companies were helping themselves to moko, and also to haka. Portraits of ancestors were plastered across shower curtains and sold online. There's nothing to stop them. You see, trade rules have not been about protecting mātauranga Māori. Back to now. How it works is that the Crown negotiates trade and investment agreements on behalf of all New Zealanders. At the moment, there is no formal system in place for Māori to fulfil our role as kaitiaki and rangatira. Many Māori have tried hard over the years to influence, to get involved, but they've been told most negotiations are too far down the track. Sorry, it's nearly signed off. Things need to be kept secret. Don't want other trade partners to get a whiff. The Crown can't push too hard to protect Māori things. The farmers will lose out. At least it's good for our Māori exporters. But trade isn't just about selling stuff. It's about protecting what was reaffirmed by Te Tiriti. And trade rules can restrict government policy and regulations to honour Te Tiriti. For example, when they started on the TPPA negotiations in 2010, a big issue for Māori was offshore mining by foreign mining companies. The same transnationals had been active in using trade and investment agreements to sue other governments over environmental policies that reduced their corporate profits and claimed hundreds of millions in compensation.
The response to the nuclear phase-out is a case in point. Energy companies are not happy that Germany has opted to abandon nuclear energy, and so E.ON and RWE have launched legal proceedings at the German Federal Constitutional Court. If this wasn't enough, the Swedish company Vattenfall is appealing at a private ISDS arbitration tribunal, where it is demanding 3.7 billion euros in compensation. Corporations are suing to block a raising of the minimum wage, block health protection measures, overturn a ban on toxic waste dumping in a drinking water area.
The same thing could happen here in Aotearoa if we bring about stricter climate policies or cancel permits for water bottling. So 9 claimant groups ended up at the Waitangi Tribunal in 2015. To settle the claim, the trade unit within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade agreed in mediation to set up and fund a new entity called ngatoki WHAKARURURANGA. It will have one job. Yep, just one, but it's a big one. To set the bar for trade policy and agreements to protect and advance any and all Māori rights, interests, duties and responsibilities under Te Tiriti and he whakaputanga that may be affected positively and negatively by trade policy and negotiation. Our mission is to have effective and genuine influence on trade negotiations every step of the way on behalf of Aotearoa. Because it's all about how we can bring a new leadership model to every stage of the process. Because remember, Māori aren't just stakeholders, we are tiriti partners. Trade isn't just about commercial benefits, it's about protection of our rights and taonga. It's going to be great for everyone, especially tamariki mokopuna.